Hello everyone, my name is Adam Hamer and this is part 10 of my testimony about the 1990s GATE program. And the last few episodes I've been giving a lot of research and historical context and personal experience testimony that is important for what I'm going to discuss moving forward. But for this episode 10, I wanted to spend the whole episode just discussing the GATE program and in the context of my personal experiences and anomalous mental phenomena, psychoenergetics, the deeper layers of the program, the surface layers of the program, and what I experienced. So, as I've said before, my name is Adam Hamer, and I was born in 1988 in Tucson, Arizona. I was born at Tucson Medical Center. I am Native American. I'm enrolled in the Muskogee Nation, and I am also Cherokee. My family history goes back very far in this country. My ancestors, not only were they Native American, they fought in the Revolution, the Civil War, the Alamo, the Tribal Wars, and on and on and on. And so, to my dying day, I will always be a patriot who fights for our Constitution and this land, because this land is my land. This land is your land. If you're an American and you're here and you're a patriot and you support the Constitution, I support you. That's why I'm sharing my story, because our government does not feel anymore that the Constitution is an important document. And you see, that makes them not acting in the capacity of the government the way they're supposed to. So that's why I'm taking the actions I am, because they need to be reminded that they serve the American people. And so they're not allowed to operate industrial scale abuse programs under cover of gifted education. That's simply not allowed. And further, I have uncovered unequivocal evidence of their participation in such programs and the criminal actions that took place against my persons as child and adult, facilitated by my funneling through these programs into covert black operations that I did not consent to. Because of that, I'm sharing my story in the hopes that these individuals who perpetrated these crimes do not ever do this bullshit to anybody else. So, now we get to GATE. And, excuse me, my experience and encounter first with the GATE program begins consciously that I can recall in 1994. In 1994, I was enrolled in the spring at a school called Kelland Elementary School. I was in kindergarten there, and Kelland Elementary School is right down the street from SAIC Tucson, which, give you a little bit of context, SAIC is a complex entity. It is a defense contractor who has conducted a lot of high-level research for the U.S. government, including, obviously, some very not-so-good things. But that said, they changed their corporate identity later on in time after the 1990s, and they merged with Lockheed Martin, and then they created a new company called Leidos. Leidos is the original SAIC who conducted the experiments that were, in some instances, in the instance of my life, tied to the deeper layers of the GATE program. This company was called SAIC, is now called Leidos. It is now, all three of these, Leidos, Lockheed, and SAIC, are partners. The new SAIC is essentially a corporate front that acts as a HR person, while Leidos is the current SAP cloud provider for the Pentagon and the current choice by the CIO of the Pentagon, who worked for Booz Allen Hamilton, who I spoke about yesterday. And in the context of not acting with honor as comes to legacy program data, that is closely related to Leidos and what I just said, as the government, the Pentagon, Leidos, and the SAT program operators, after I exposed the paper trail of my files, undertook a data migration. Now, we're going to discuss this in another video because there are a lot of facts that need to be discussed about this, but the existence of this data migration, which is currently underway and a lot of it's been completed, is, I assert absolutely, unequivocally, without a doubt, a cover to burn, miscode, mischaracterize, conveniently lose, or delete data from legacy programs and legacy black operations. And the data that will be deleted or has been, or miscoded or burned, involves things that are inconvenient or crimes that the U.S. government committed, including those against my persons, which is why when I filed my lawsuit, it was really important that the judge compelled my file released immediately. And the fact that she did not did me a disservice and is a giant violation of my right to justice. But such is life. When you live in a country where the government does not follow through with their duty to their civilians, and they wage instead mind war on their civilians and their children. So in 1994 in the GATE program, I would repeatedly be taken out of my kindergarten class to the library where it was dark, and I was given a variety of tests in the library. These tests involved testing my aptitude, my IQ, and they involved the playing of what I understand to be the Gateway tapes. Now, that was my first exposure to them. My exposure to those tapes continued on for many years, which I will explain, because the purpose of them is not for strictly meditation and consciousness research. As I've stated before, if you look at the original patents, which I have and I will show you, they are developed by a CIA adjacent person who was involved with research with the CIA's consciousness department, who specialized in the development of what later would become neurowarfare. So the purposes of that tool, it contains in the patent mode for easy EEG heterodyning. So I'll give you an example of how that's used in the testing for GATE. The government intel agencies had already hits for who they were looking for as pertains to psychoenergetics and anomalous mental phenomena, what profiles they were looking for. Obviously, as stated from the DIA's documents, they were looking for somnambulists. They were looking for people who were easily hypnotized. They were looking for people who were highly intelligent, highly anomalous, both in terms of the literal growths of their brain and also the structure of their internals. And they were also looking for people with anomalous abilities, such as psychoenergetic abilities, psychokinetic abilities, and the like. So one of the easy ways you can test that is you can record someone's brain neural signals into an audio file. And that's actually the basis of the easiest format for EEG heterodyning. Now, you can record these in other ways, and it's not necessarily audio is the only way to do so. But take, for example, the government could have grabbed one of their verified remote viewers who had a high target hit rate. They record him doing a successful remote view hit. They record his brain state into an audio file. They then take that audio file and layer that audio file into the Gateway tapes. That is one of the reasons those tapes were used in the GATE programs as a screening tool, because how that would work is if you then played that for a particular test group and then use your apparatuses, which is also why a lot of people remember the GATE operators coming into schools with devices, analog type equipment like briefcases, and in my case they had like wands in the briefcase. They brought analog equipment, but I was also taken off campus into sites where they had dedicated rooms with this stuff, so it was a mixture of both. And I'll explain that too, because in my case it was initial testing that was taking place at first Kellon, and then that led to a variety of off-site testing that occurred at a variety of places, some of which I am aware of and some of which I am not, and one of which I am positive that was SAIC Tucson, which is now Leidos technically, but that was around the corner from Kellon. It was on Wilmot, and it's like a couple, literally 2 or 3 blocks from my elementary school or so. It's like you could walk there if you were an adult. And so that brings me to the next part, which is how I was transported from Kellon to these other facilities, gray sites, black sites, these defense contractors facilities. Buses. Here's a childhood drawing, one of my memories from when I was 12. And look how creepy this is. It says, moving very fast, carrying a lot of kids, driving all day. Okay, one of the dead giveaways that I had when I knew something was very wrong with my GATE experience, when I first started realizing that these programs were more than I had initially thought after I had not, like, realized that I was suffering from severe dissociation and flashbacks. I repeatedly remember being taken on buses constantly at Kellogg and at subsequent schools all the time. I was always being taken on buses, and I don't see that being repeated in the forums, but I was literally like on buses all the time. And I asked my parent and who was responsible for me then, and they had not any clue what I was talking about. Said I was not on field trips at that age, no. And I remember I was at the U of A, I was at the corporate facility where the campus where SAIC is. I remember that. I was terrified of that building for a long time after. I was taken on the military base, the Air Force base. I was taken to places that resembled airplane hangars. I was taken to big, like, Faraday chambers, and I was taken to weird rooms that had strange layouts, like one with a giant, like, chessboard floor, and another one with, like, not rectangles, trapezoids. And these were, in my understanding now, were used for programming and brainwashing, and also testing altered states of mind and a lot of other stuff. But these facilities, those are off campus, and so those I was taken to starting in kindergarten all the way up until I was about 7 or 8 years old, which is when I found myself in a doctor's office because my parents had noticed enough was going on with me that they were like, what the fuck? What the fuck? I'll get to that. So back up to 1994, I'm at the library. I'm being tested with IQ tests. I'm being tested with the ones where you put the little blocks in the different shaped things. It was like, IQ tests for a really young child. So then I remember being taken to a dark area, and I remember the people who did this, that I didn't know who they were. And I remember involved, like I said, the headphones, and why, again, back to EEG heterodyning. So if you record, like, someone with a hit rate of, remote viewing, and then you play that back for someone else's brain, and you monitor their neurals, well, you can see if their brain gets a hit when it plays back the same EEG heterodyne audio file that I was talking about. So, like, for example, obviously, whatever I had done or said or on those tests, they wanted to, utilize me for these deeper layer programs against my will. So they started transporting me right off campus at that point into the deeper layer programs, which were psychoenergetics, without a doubt. What the deeper layer programs were was, for years I had forgotten the majority of it. Like I said, it was floating in a sea of inky darkness. It was literally just like a void where the memory would be. And I had memories from before and memories from after. And it's weird because I did remember all this stuff in between and other, like I said, really weird, not good stuff that I had not understood the context of for my entire life. And then now that I do, from the Privacy Act and from my pursuit of justice, it's all easy to connect the dots and see what was going on. Sorry, this is really hard for me to talk about this stuff. It's very, very, very traumatizing even to just go back to it. But after kindergarten in Kellogg, because I obviously was consciously aware I was being taken off campus, and what was going on off campus was, initially at that age I was taken to a lot of lab facilities. A lot of, clearly they were like research facilities at the youngest age, where there would be sterile rooms. They would be absolutely lab chambers, oftentimes the one-sided glass, many times a sort of hexagon or an octagon shaped, like step down in the middle, and rooms that were like Faraday cages, and then a variety of different rooms with different levels of austerity. Many were just like all white, and those were the ones that often had the light panel, which was like red, blue, green, and yellow, I think. And they would use those. They put a little thing over your eyes as a way to induce standing sensory deprivation. So that would be used to induce altered states of mind. And what they would do is, that's also the context I had explained before about how ritual abuse factors, and that's when some of those occurred. Some of those occurred when they were running battery tests on me as a child on these off-campus facilities run by military and intel individuals. And what they were doing is they were like purposely harming me and inducing, basically torturing me like a little, not basically, that's what was going on. And they would have me hooked up to a lot of complex apparatus that were giving them data. So like at the early phase, they were taking me off campus, and it was like a little bit of an initial like grooming. And I have really horrible memories of being taken to, the mall in town during school hours. Someone I shouldn't have been there with was a teacher's aide who's affiliated with this, and he had bought me a toy, and I knew this was wrong, and he told me, don't tell your parents about this. And I was just like, dude, not cool, not way more than not cool, not acceptable. And then to have a pursuit of justice be met with more misconduct, it's like beyond me. So they start you off after the little bit of grooming with the shattering, because they want to create that root anchor. They want to shatter that mind so that they could start molding it the way that they wanted to, and these horrific plans they had. So in the deeper layers of the program, it wasn't like again, I repeat, it's not like, oh, you're special because you were in GATE and you got to wear the headphones. Nah, if you wear the headphones and you don't know what I'm talking about, then you're lucky, and you should be thankful, because whatever part of the experience you had, whatever role it plugs into the deeper layers, it clearly didn't involve some of this stuff. Now, if your memory of the program is inky, non-existent, and peppered with flashbacks you don't understand, well, you may want to take a step back and maybe, I don't know, like, you might want to look deeper into your own past and your potential involvement with these non-consensual deeper layer programs. That said, a lot of these laboratory settings, some of which had popcorn ceilings, because I remember that there would be, like I said, you'd be on a metal table, sometimes you'd be strapped down, sometimes you'd be electroshocked, chair, same thing, sometimes you'd be electroshocked, and also standing. They'd put goggles on you that would be transparent but kind of like clear, and there would be that horizontal like stoplight looking thing that would strobe at different like intervals and light intensities and colors, and that was used to both induce altered states of consciousness and to grab the corresponding neural data, because that's what the helmets were. At that point, they weren't just headsets. Like, if you just remember headsets, that was just a regular gate. Like, what I experienced firsthand were a variety of really uncomfortable and horrific experimental headsets that make no sense, and I have very little frame of reference for. And I have some understanding as to what these are now. Like I said, they're magnetic encephalograph, VR, some sort of modified Persinger helmet. But there were also other ones that I don't understand. There's like a little visor kind of thing, like if you've seen Star Wars, like Lobot, they had something like that, and I don't know what the purpose of that was. So, and there's no product out with that. They also had another one that I remember, which was really weird. I think this is the VR one. It was obviously like a military VR one, and you would put it on your head, and there was a mode where they could read your neural data and then play like a rendering of it inside the VR. So you would basically, it was this horrible thing. They would use it for brainwashing, where you could see your own thoughts, and they would use it in conjunction with the altered states that they'd induce an out-of-body experience, and then force you to view it in a virtual environment and use that to create programming. They would also induce out-of-body experiences in the laboratory setting and study what happened to the consciousness when they did so. And this includes inducing cardiac arrest on me and reversing it with pharmacological agents as a child. And this is one of the most horrific things that I ever experienced. And this was in a laboratory setting, and this I will talk about another time more in detail. Anyways, we're in 1994. I'm still at Kellen in the spring. This is all when all this began and the shattering stuff began, and even I believe around the time where that person took me to the mall, because that was shortly after they showed us the movie Fern Gully, I think, too, and that was somewhere around that era. It would have been on tape around that time. Yeah, I think this is the time to end this one. That's the internal clock saying no more discussing this right now, because it's just a lot for me. But I'll be back to tell more about what I experienced in the GATE program. I'll be back to share more of my testimony, and I wanted to read to you some more stuff I had created in childhood that are about and from these programs. I'll get to that. It's clearly not the video to be doing that. But I'll end on the note that I left Kellogg and went to Corbett in the fall of '94, where obviously I was unhappy at Kellogg because I was being funneled into these research programs and abused, and I didn't know because I was being drugged and lied to and trafficked. My parents were being lied to, or parent, because at that point I only had one parent, which is probably a reason why I was picked, because I was easy pickings for them. That said, God, this is painful to talk about. I didn't want to be at Kellogg anymore. It was too painful, because obviously I knew what was going on, but unconsciously. And so I moved to Corbett, where I was put in a self-contained gate program, and things got a whole lot worse. And then I was only at Corbett through '94. I don't think I was there in '95. I had moved to Van Horn Elementary School, where things continued, and I was still taking on buses, boom, 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 all day. I'll get to that. There was a lot more headsets at that point, and I'll get to that. There's another use for the gateway tapes, which involves reinforcing hypnotic programming, can be useful, especially after the shattering occurs and trauma anchors are installed, but it's not the video for that. And I want to just mention too, the whole time, all the schools I was transferring, I kept complaining to my parents about how I was being bullied, and I was crying. I didn't want to go to school, because obviously I knew what was going on. Unconsciously, I was being taken off school and horrifically abused and tortured as a guinea pig for these research programs. That's who was bullying me. It was little intel and military agents who were abusing a child. That's who were the people that were bullying me. That's what I was talking about. See, I didn't understand that until much later, and that's why also, like I discussed yesterday, I have flashbacks of what was perpetrated against me by these people, and have had those flashbacks since I was that age, because it's just horrific what was perpetrated against me. And then also the miscarriage of justice. Shame on all you who are watching this. I know you are. Shame on you. You are sick. You are a traitor, and you are guilty of treason to the United States of America.